Millionaire forced a waitress to play piano. For hidden talent left everyone speechless. The hotel was the kind of place where people tried very hard to look like they belonged. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling so high, it seemed to disappear into the sky. Every table was dressed in white linen, set with silver cutlery that caught the light. The guests wore expensive clothes and spoke in low, confident voices. 500 people filled the ballroom of the Aldridge Grand Hotel in Chicago that Saturday evening, and every single one of them believed they were important. Most of them were right. Lena Vasquez did not feel important. She felt tired. She was 28 years old, with dark eyes that noticed everything, and hands that had once known how to do something extraordinary. Tonight, those hands carried a silver tray of champagne glasses through the crowd, careful not to spill a drop, careful not to be seen as a person at all. That was the job. Move quietly, smile when necessary, disappear when possible. She had been doing this for 3 years. 3 years of double shifts, of sore feet and aching shoulders, of counting tips at the end of the night and calculating whether there was enough to cover her mother's medication for the week. Her mother, Clara, lived in a small house in rural Ohio with a bad heart and very little money. Lena sent her almost everything she earned. There was never quite enough, but there was never nothing either, and Lena told herself that was something. She did not think about the other life she had almost lived. She had learned not to. Quote, in the center of the ballroom, on a raised platform near the far wall, stood a grand piano. It was a 9-foot Steinway, polished to a deep black shine, its lid propped open like a wing ready for flight. It had been placed there for a performance that was supposed to happen at 9 o'clock, a private recital by Diana Calloway, the celebrated young pianist and daughter of the evening's host. Diana had canceled that afternoon. No one outside the family knew exactly why. The event manager, Marco, had spent 3 hours on the phone trying to find a replacement and had found nothing. Now the piano sat in the middle of the room like a beautiful, silent problem, and Marco was sweating through his jacket. The man responsible for all of it, the party, the piano, the problem, was Richard Calloway. Richard was 58 years old and had built his fortune the way some men build walls, brick by brick, with great effort and very little warmth. He had started with nothing in South Chicago and had ended up with office towers, hotels, and his name on things. He was not a cruel man, exactly. He was a man who had forgotten that other people had feelings as real as his own. Success does that to some people, slowly, without them noticing. When 9 o'clock came, and the piano bench remained empty, Richard set down his glass, stood up from his table, and spoke loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "My daughter has chosen not to be here tonight," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. She had one responsibility, one, and she decided that whatever she was feeling was more important than keeping her word. He paused. "So the piano is empty. If anyone in this room can play, now would be the time to step forward." A few people laughed softly. Others looked at their plates. Nobody moved toward the piano. Richard's eyes moved across the room, the way a man's eyes move when he is used to finding what he wants. They passed over tables of guests, over Marco standing near the wall wringing his hands, and then they stopped. They stopped on Lena. She had paused without realizing it. Her eyes had drifted to the piano, just for a moment, the way a person's eyes drift to a window when they have been inside for too long. It was an unconscious thing, barely a second, but Richard Calloway was a man who noticed small things, because small things had always mattered in business. "You," he said, and he pointed at her. The young woman with the tray. "You were looking at the piano. Go ahead. Sit down and play something." Lock. The room turned toward her. Lena felt the heat rise in her face. Around her, she heard the soft sounds of people shifting in their seats, a few quiet whispers, the thin edge of laughter that people use when they are watching something uncomfortable and do not know where to look. She looked at Marco. He gave a helpless little shrug that said, "Please do not make this worse." She should have said no. She should have smiled politely and said she was just a waitress, that she didn't play, that she was sorry. That was the sensible thing. That was the safe thing. Instead, she set her tray down on the nearest empty table. She walked toward the piano slowly. The crowd parted without meaning to. Her shoes were flat and practical, her uniform plain black and white, her hair tied back the way it always was for work. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who served other people for a living, and yet something in the way she walked, steady, unhurried, like a person who knows exactly where they are going, made the room grow quieter. She reached the piano bench and sat down. She reached forward and adjusted the bench, just 1 inch closer to the keys. It was a small movement, almost nothing, but 3 people near the front noticed it, and one of them, a retired music professor named Dr. Helen Marsh, sat up very straight in her chair. Lena placed her hands on the keys. She did not press them. She simply rested her fingers there, feeling the cool ivory, feeling the familiar weight of the instrument underneath her touch. She closed her eyes. For 4 years, she had not done this. For 4 years, she had kept that door closed, because opening it hurt too much. Music had been her whole world once, the thing she was born for, the thing her father had given her before he passed, the thing she had loved more than she had ever loved anything. She had walked away from it not because she stopped loving it, but because love alone does not pay for medicine. But here was a piano, and here were her hands, and the door, it turned out, had never been fully closed. She had only been pressing against it from the other side, hoping it would hold. It didn't hold. The piece was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It is one of the most difficult and emotionally demanding works in the history of piano music. It begins quietly, almost gently, like someone starting a story they are not sure they should tell. Then it builds. It asks things of the player that go beyond technique. It asks for honesty, for the willingness to feel something painful in front of strangers and not look away. Lena did not look away. Within 30 seconds, every conversation in the ballroom had died. Waitstaff who had been moving between tables stopped walking and stood still. A woman near the back put down her fork. A man who had been checking his phone slipped it into his pocket without looking at it. The music filled the room the way water fills a glass, completely, all at once, with no space left over for anything else. It was not a perfect performance in the technical sense. Her hands had not touched keys in 4 years, and the body forgets some things. But what came through those small imperfections was something that no perfectly rehearsed performance could have given them. It was real. It was a person pouring something true into the air, and everyone in that room, no matter how rich or guarded or distracted they were, felt it land. Richard Calloway felt it land. He was standing near his table, a glass still in his hand, when he recognized the piece. He knew it because Diana had played it for him once, years ago, when she was a teenager, and still believed her father understood what music meant to her. She had played it on a Sunday afternoon in their home, and when she finished, he had said, "Very nice," and gone back to his newspaper. He had not understood then what he had been given. He understood now. His hand tightened around the glass. Something moved across his face. Not quite grief, not quite regret, but something in that neighborhood. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the phone call that morning, the argument, the things they had both said that could not be taken back. He thought of all the Sunday afternoons he had given to his newspaper when he could have given them to her. The music went on. 7 minutes. The longest 7 minutes many of those people would remember for years afterward. When the last note ended, it did not end sharply. It faded, the way a good story fades at the close, slowly, leaving something behind in the air even after the sound was gone. The ballroom was silent for 5 full seconds. Then it erupted. 500 people stood up. The applause was not polite. It was the kind of applause that comes from a place deeper than manners, the kind that happens when people have been moved against their will and are grateful for it. Some people were wiping their eyes and trying not to show it. Dr. Helen Marsh was not trying to hide it at all. She was clapping with her hands above her head, which she had not done since she was 20 years old. Lena opened her eyes. She looked at the room as if she had forgotten it was there. For 7 minutes, she had been somewhere else entirely, somewhere she had not visited in 4 years, and coming back felt strange and bright, like stepping outside after a long time indoors. Huh. Richard Calloway set his glass down on the table behind him and walked across the room. The crowd watched him. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone knew that Richard Calloway did not cross a room like that, with no particular destination in mind, no deal to make, no handshake to give. He walked straight to the piano, and he stopped in front of Lena. She looked up at him. He was tall and gray-haired, and had the face of a man who had made very hard decisions, and was used to standing behind them. But right now, that face looked different. It looked tired. It looked like a man meeting himself after a long time away. "I owe you an apology," he said. The room was still quiet enough that people heard it. "The way I asked you to do that, pointing at you, making a scene, that was not right. I am sorry for that." He paused. "I am also sorry because you played my daughter's favorite piece, and I think you just reminded me of something I should not have needed reminding of." Lena looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "What did it remind you of?" He thought about the question seriously. "That some things matter more than I have been acting like they do." He asked for her name. She told him, Lena Vasquez. He told her his. She said she knew. Everyone in the room probably knew. Then he asked the question she had not been expecting. "How did you end up here?" She could have given the short answer. She gave him the honest one instead. Briefly, without drama. She told him about the conservatory scholarship she had earned at 18. She told him about her mother's illness and the choice she had made, school or medicine, music or care. She told him it had not felt like a hard choice at the time, because it was not really a choice at all. When someone you love needs help, you help them. Everything else waits. He listened to every word. He did not look at his phone. He did not glance around the room. He simply listened, the way he had listened to the music, with his full attention. And Lena noticed this, because in her 3 years of working these events, not one guest had ever listened to her like that. The following Monday morning, Lena's phone rang while she was eating breakfast before her shift. It was an assistant she did not know, calling from a number she did not recognize. The assistant was polite and brief. She explained that an arrangement had been made, completely and fully, for Lena's mother's medical care going forward. The bills were taken care of, all of them. There was no paperwork required on Lena's end. It had already been handled. Lena sat at her kitchen table for a long time after the call ended. She did not cry, exactly, though her eyes did something that was close to it. She thought about her mother. She thought about the piano. She thought about what it felt like to play again after 4 years. The way the music had come back to her hands like it had never left. Like it had simply been waiting, patient and quiet, for her to open the door. The assistant had also mentioned, almost as a second thought, that the director of the Chicago Symphony's Emerging Artist Program had requested a meeting with her. Not an audition, a meeting, to talk about what was possible. Lena put on her uniform that morning. She went to work. She carried her tray and smiled when necessary, and moved quietly through the room the way she always had. But something was different inside her. A door that had been closed for 4 years was now open, and the light coming through it was warm. That same Monday evening, Diana Calloway was sitting in her apartment in Lincoln Park when her phone buzzed on the counter. She almost did not pick it up. She and her father had not spoken since Saturday morning, and she was still too hurt to want to speak to him now. But she picked it up. It was a voicemail, her father's voice, and it sounded different from the way it usually sounded. The sharpness that was always there, the businesslike clip of it, was gone. What was left was something quieter, something that sounded, if she was honest with herself, like a person who had been surprised by their own feelings and had not yet figured out what to do about it. He did not ask her to apologize. He did not make the call about himself or his evening or what her absence had cost him. He said only this, that a young woman had played her favorite Chopin piece the night before, in a ballroom full of strangers, and that it had made him understand something he should have understood a long time ago. He said that music was not a small thing. He said he was sorry for ever making her feel that it was. Then he said, "I don't need you to perform for anyone. I just want you to play for me again, the way you used to on Sunday afternoons. If you are willing, there is no pressure. I just miss the sound of it." Diana listened to the voicemail twice. Then she sat down at her own piano, the one in the corner of her living room that had been covered with a cloth since Saturday, and she began to play. People who were at the Aldridge Grand Hotel that evening still talk about it. Not about the food, which was excellent, or the decorations, which were beautiful, or even about Richard Calloway's toast, which was well written and completely forgettable. They talk about the waitress who sat down at the piano. They talk about the way the room went quiet. They talk about how they felt something move through them that they could not quite name. Some of them went home that night and called someone they had not spoken to in too long. Some of them made decisions they had been putting off. One man, a banker who had not cried in 15 years, cried on the train home and felt better for it. Lena Vasquez met with the director of the Emerging Artist Program 6 weeks later. She did not leave her job immediately. Her mother still needed care, and old habits of caution die slowly. But she began to play again, every morning before work, on a second-hand upright she found at a church sale for $80. She played for an hour each day, rebuilding what 4 years of silence had softened. It came back faster than she expected. The body remembers what the heart never forgot. 6 months after that Saturday night, Lena Vasquez performed on a real stage for the first time in 4 years. The concert hall was not the largest in Chicago, and the audience was not 500 people, but they were there because they wanted to hear her. And when she sat down and adjusted the bench, just 1 inch, as always, a few of them leaned forward without knowing why. She played Chopin. She played it the way she had played it in that hotel ballroom, honestly, without holding anything back, as if the music mattered more than the impression it made. Because for Lena, it always had. Some people carry extraordinary things quietly, for years, waiting for the moment the world finally asks,